Is it very
It has
cold?
been yeah, it has been very. Students with film skills, but also with photography skills and some acting on that side in the township areas. And it's just been really a very cool and ride that we've been having, and we've been able to get a lot of students into the college level program. And yeah, just help them move forward with their dreams and their storytelling abilities, which has been just one of the greatest things that I have been able to be a part of. So that's been really exciting. Before that, I was working on the Hollywood side of things, working as an associate casting director. So basically, I put actors into movies. Had a little bit of writing experience as well. Was in the Writers Guild of America, and yeah, just had some good doors open to me on that side of the world. But really felt like this was where I was supposed to be long term, and so started Film School Africa, and yeah, we've just been moving ever since.
I'm reminded of the movie 2012, and I remember that after the floods that had engulfed our planet, the eventual station that they found refuge on was in Cape Town. I think you must have been the captain's ship.
Probably, maybe it was a sign. I think that's a Roland Emmerich film. So yeah, maybe.
Definitely. And you touched on some critical points there. One is teaching. And you know, in SA, where creative arts is concerned, we've had a number of challenges. And particularly in the communities where you work, most parents would want to prioritize science and other technical subjects as opposed to the creative arts, and particularly filmmaking. What's been some of the challenges that you've come across as a film school in regards to convincing parents to allow their kids to dream beyond your popular subjects?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, when I was working on the township side of things, I think that the biggest hurdle was trying to get parents involved at all, and just even understanding what their kids were doing. I didn't see quite as much parental involvement in terms of what they wanted students to study. I think they only really knew what they didn't want them to study. And I think that was just a perception. I think it just had to do with whether or not you can make money and put food on the table. And once parents experienced the films that their students were making, the films that their kids were making, once they experienced a night where we would have them walk over a red carpet and have our own little festival and demonstrate what they had done, I think then parents were fully involved, and they believed very much in what was happening. I think parents are, if they're not in front of you, you kind of wonder what are they doing and where are they? And so I think once they understood that they were actually somewhere productive and learning something productive, and they were working with cameras and working with computers, I do think that parents started to get on board, especially when they get to the college level. There really is an understanding of, I can actually make money here. There is an industry here. There is an industry in this country that is fruitful and growing. So yeah, there's really positive things, I think, happening in South Africa for film.
Definitely. I also want to just take it a bit further, because now we're looking at it from the dimension of the parent who may not necessarily understand creative arts and film in particular. But also, what about the schooling sector in as far as encouraging kids to pursue careers within the film realm? Have you found any participation, support, or even encouragement from teachers even to allow kids to access that part of filmmaking?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there's the difficulty lies in funding, right? So when you're dealing with a school that doesn't have much funding, the first things to go are arts programs and things that are more creative, right? But I think that the schools that I have had experience working alongside have been really positive, because we have helped to sort of fill the void that they knew they couldn't fill. So the fact that there was a program happening after school in their backyard has been very welcome. We've had schools open the doors to us to be able to actually launch programs within their schools. So we've had great support from the schools. I think they recognize that they don't have the funds to be able to do it directly as a program within the school. So those that know we are in their backyard have actually been very supportive, in my opinion.
That's quite important also. I want to look at the other part. You mentioning a point here that unless a parent, or rather, when the schools feel that the funding is quite limited as a resource, they then cut artistic programs first. Do you feel or sense that they understand that artists essentially are social engineers, and the absence of participation or support to a growing artist may very well mean that the social mayhem that we see is perpetuated further?
Yeah, I think that taking arts out of schools is a huge it's a stumbling block that's hindering what the potential could be, for sure. I do think that I understand the thought process, because there's no test at the end that says whether or not you are a good trumpet player or whether or not you're a good performer. And so it does become, I think, as an administrator, I can understand the thought process of, well, there's no test at the end of this, but there is a maths test, and there is a language test. And so you have to make decisions based on what you have and based on what you can do well. But I think that, good schools also help create clubs, student-led initiatives, are also very positive. And there are a lot of NGOs out there helping with those things as well. And so, yeah, I think it's tough, because I can understand from one side that being the thought process, and yet at the same time, it does so much for society. It does so much for engagement for students, so that they're involved in something, so that they don't get involved in other things that are less productive. So yeah, it's a difficult balance to strike. And certainly in a perfect world, you'd have all the funding in all the areas that were needed.
I just want to look at this from a macro, as well as bring it down to a micro level. We've got your Cannes Film Festival, we've got your Sundance, we've got your different film awards, as well as festivals in America, even particularly Hollywood. We know it's the most coveted amongst all. But I want to bring it down to, how then do you compare what Nollywood has done in Nigeria, what Bollywood has done in India, what Hollywood has influenced, and where we are as South Africa in terms of grooming young filmmakers?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, I come at that question as an American. You can hear my accent. I'm not a South African, so I'm definitely coming at it from an outside perspective, which is what I have to offer. I do think that one of the things that I admire about places like Nigeria and India is they have been very supportive locally. There has been a local support for content You know, in Nigeria, Nigerians love watching Nigerian films, you know, and so that has been cultivated. That has been a priority. I think that, you know, that's not happened in a lot of places. And I think, you know, in some ways you can blame Hollywood because the content comes over this way. And in other ways, you could look at it and go, well, maybe it's elevating the content level and it's giving us some good things to aspire to as well. You know, I think, you know, India produces more than any other area in the world, you know, when it comes to numbers. But I think when it's a numbers game, Hollywood also realized real early that the more you produce, the more money you make. So, you know, you have this war for enough content and enough creative content versus enough quality content. And so, you know, you're constantly in that battle as well. But I think South Africa has done a very good job of continuing to embrace both. And I think that's really important because I think, you know, when you become insular, then there's less funding, there's less happening, there are fewer projects, and then it feels a little bit like you're preaching to the choir. So what I appreciate about South African film industry personally is the fact that there is an industry for the local, but that the industry does not only cater to the local. There's so much happening with international film, international advertising, international television that comes and that bolsters the industry. It puts more funding in, puts more money in, and then everybody rises, and that means local content too. So I think that South Africa, while probably a little slower in the rollout, I think that they've been doing a really good job with it. I don't think that there's any knocking it. You know, you move forward with what you can, and you know, and it's not a nation that is overflowing with money. So when you consider what has been done, I think it's incredibly impressive.
You know, I cannot help but always look to America. One, because I've been there. I've visited twice, and I've always been impressed by America and what they churn out. But also at the same time, do you sense that most filmmaking countries often look to America to duplicate or replicate what America is doing about America, and then they try to domesticate that and make it as if it's about them, whereas they are copying exactly what America is doing? And how then does that affect the trajectory of film and growing local sectors in these different countries you've been?
Yeah. Again, I come at it from my American perspective, but I personally think that there are things to be gleaned as long as you don't allow it to take your voice. And I think as long as people understand, first you have, it's about who am I? What is my experience? What stories do I have to tell? And understanding that. And then, you know, there's nothing wrong in my opinion with kind of not having to reinvent the wheel. There's a reason why story structure works. It's because it has just been proven time and time and time again. So is there anything wrong with borrowing from story structure? No, of course not. No, nothing wrong with it. No need to reinvent the wheel. But if you're simply trying to churn out Hollywood style without in any understanding of your own voice and what story you have to tell and what you bring to the table, then it will start to feel like copying. Right. But I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with understanding, you know, it's like the rule of thirds, right? When the rule of thirds works because of the visual understanding that we have to beauty and the way the eye follows the frame, you know. And that's true. That's just true all around the world. And so it's okay for us to look at what has been learned, I think, and implement those things, but not allow it to take the intrinsic uniqueness that is the South African voice. And that's different across the board, right? I mean, you think about how many official languages South Africa has, and so that voice is going to be unique because there is such a real melting pot of ideas and voices and ways that people communicate to one another. So I think that there's something really special to be had, and you don't want to lose that.
Definitely. I just want to zoom into a very critical question, which so often we miss or maybe misunderstand. What, in your perspective, makes a film? Is it the script? Is it the casting director? Is it the producer? Is it the actors, actresses? Is it the art department? Is it the costume? Is it makeup? What makes film in your perspective?
I think that there's a lot that goes into a film. I think that people forget how many people it really takes to make a good quality movie. I think story is king. You know, that's something that we've heard, you know, over and over again. If I have a student that produces a great script, whether or not they have the fanciest lights or the fanciest camera or even the best actors, I can look past it because the story is so good that you don't need all of the fanfare. On the other side, I think that a cast brings money into the theater. It brings bodies into the theater. From the American standpoint, it's why that star system was created, because people would see that this person is in the movie. That's why I'm going to the movie. That's why I'm paying for my ticket. So, you know, there is a complexity to that where you go, okay, does the actor really add value? Well, at some stage, yes, they do. They add value. Certainly the director is the person who's in charge and at the helm and is making, you know, all of those critical decisions. And then when you get to the very end, the editor makes or breaks a movie. I mean, an editor can save things that you thought could never be saved, but with creativity and maneuvering and so there's so many levels to what makes something good. You know, when it comes down to the question, what's most important, I think story is always most important. What's at the core? What's the heart of the story? If you've got the most amazing director and lights and film, you know, camera and editor, everything, but your story is bad, you still have a bad movie.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to touch briefly on the not so palatable sides of filmmaking. I think few people have not seen the Me Too movement, those particularly who are interested in film. And I think the Weinstein Company was always in the media for having perhaps been at the forefront, right, of what we call couch auditions and many other fancy words that have been used to describe this phenomenon. What, in your experience, has been the impact of the Me Too movement in film? Please look at it as a casting director. Please get into your previous shoes if you still are doing casting directing. To look at it as a casting director and juxtapose this against the wave of the Me Too movement. How did this affect how film is made, and how did it affect how you would recruit actors, actresses, or even film talent?
Yeah. So I was already in South Africa when the Me Too movement hit. So from that perspective, you know, I wasn't necessarily in it all as that whole element was unraveling. However, you know, I've sat in rooms where you know, a woman will leave the room and a director and a producer will just rip her apart based on how she looks, you know, or will make her a subject, you know. Oh, did you see how she looked? And, you know, and I'll be literally at the back of the room running the camera going, I cannot believe that this is what's being said when someone leaves the room. So from that perspective, I'm amazed it took this long. I'm amazed it took this long for society to start to kind of wake up to the misogynistic way that we operate. You know, I mean, we look back at things like the Bill Cosby thing and how that could have been undone a decade earlier, but society wasn't ready for it. So I'm amazed that it's taken us this long. I'm proud of the people who have stood up for themselves and have spoken out against what's happening in places like Hollywood, especially. And I think, part of what we're learning, of course, all of us as a society, is this has more to do with power than anything else. And so I think any time where you have people in positions of power, you have the potential for things to go really wrong, whether it's in the movie industry, whether it's in politics, whether it's in the church. We see people of power, doing things that they shouldn't do simply because there is that power element. So I think it's been really good for the industry as a whole. I think that there's a lot of talk, not just about inclusion of women, but inclusion of people of color into all of the conversations and changing that perspective. And so I think that that's a really good thing. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think it's been a long time coming. I don't think from a casting perspective, I don't think we would do anything differently, in that we were always bringing in more people of color. Can we change this to an African American role? Can we change this role to be a woman? How would that play? I felt like in casting, that was a really big part of what we did, was actually trying to get more diversity within the film. At the end of the day, you're always capped by the studio at some level. They have to have some amount of star power. And so if you're limited to Will Smith and Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, well, then you're limited in who can be that star power. Yeah. So the more people that get into that space and become, uplifted and become that star power, then the more people you have to choose from. So from a casting perspective, I think that the casting people that I have always worked with have been very open to getting as much diversity as absolutely possible into a film.
I want to just quickly go back to the issue we spoke about, the star system of Hollywood, right? We all know about the Hollywood, I think it's called Hollywood Walk of Fame, where you've got these different stars down there. Where do we draw the line as filmmakers in regards to knowing full well that if I get that star person or that celebrity, my film is going to sell more, or then saying, rather I get an unknown actor or actress to play the role. The actor or actress can play the role quite well, but if I get this popular character, I think it's going to do more rounds, right? It'll gain more mileage. One particular example is when Idris Elba played the role of Mandela. I think also it was Terrence Howard from America who also played the role of Mandela, where some local filmmakers and actors particularly were saying, we've got local talents that you could have chosen. But the producer is probably thinking, if I've got this person who's a star already, then at least the commercial mileage is going to run further. What is your perspective or opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's a hard line to walk. You as a studio and as a producer, you think to yourself, if I add Matt Damon to the movie, I add at least 100 million in ticket sales. So while while it would be great to cast someone locally, I have a responsibility at the end of the day. I have to make a movie that brings in more than I spend. So I think it's a hard line to, and it's not a bad question to ask. And I think that's partly why directors come in and they tend to put the star power in, but they still add in so many South African actors. We saw that in Invictus, right? The two leads are Americans, but everybody else, I think almost everyone else in that movie was a local South African entity. And it helped, in my opinion, it helped everything about the movie. But it would not have gotten the release worldwide that it needed to tell that story if it had not had Morgan Freeman and Matt Damon in it. So it's so complex, right? You have to think, where do you want this to go? Do you want this to be a movie that goes first to festivals and then has sort of this slow rollout into theaters because it's really, really good? Or do you want a studio to go, no, this is a tentpole movie. We're putting it out. Here's the day, we're going to promote it. This is the day it arrives. And that's the difference between adding Matt Damon, and Morgan Freeman versus not. And so it's just a completely different movie otherwise, right? It's just a different movie. So yeah, it's complex. Hey, I mean, there's no easy answer to it. And I think, it's easy to sit on the sidelines and go, oh man, I don't like what they did. But then if you were producing the movie, and you were told, okay, you get a percentage of every rand that comes in, and they tell you can get 50 million rand coming in for the movie immediately, or you maybe will get 1.5. What would you do?
It's a fine line indeed.
It is. And so I think that's part of, buoying the star power, helping create more talented people that everybody does recognize, so that you can start to have more of that shine. His name is escaping me at the moment, but there's an African man who played. There's an African man. It was an Ava film. I'm trying to think, can't think of his name at the moment, but I mean, it was the kind of thing where he had enough built up star power to actually help bring that along, and really would have been a fairly relatively unknown in a lot of circles, but had still had enough behind him to be able to make that decision. So it's complex.
Yeah. On the flip side, though, I'm not sure if you've seen, I'm certain you've seen Beasts of No Nation, where Idris Elba is in the lead role. Have you seen that film?
I haven't.
Yeah. So I wanted to say, on the flip side, star-studded actors or actresses rather do sometimes add weight and value. And sometimes I think there's been a cry again, while still on the same vein, to say the African accent, if you don't have it, then don't hire someone from a different race group who's going to fake the accent. Why not just hire the person who has the accent naturally, right? But at the same time, again, I think we're still going back to the conversation to say, as a producer or as a filmmaker, you need to then straddle this very fine line to say, am I going to look at the investment that I've put into the film and getting it back? Or am I going to appease certain segments of society and then do what is morally just or right in some people's eyes? I just want to quickly go and do a bit of something here. I'm not sure if you've seen recently also that Mel Gibson has been in the news recently, where people, I'm still on the topic of access, right? For those who are watching, we haven't deviated. We're just looking at the dimension of it. Mel Gibson recently was in the news to say he's going to do a film targeting a banking family that's been eminent for quite a number of years and is influential in the World Bank, the IMF, and all these other Bretton Woods institutions. I just want to get your feel in terms of how then do we as filmmakers, or those who want to have access into film, right, how do they draw a fine line between telling stories that are reflective of society's current state, or those that is going to be sort of like a feel-good story that brushes over real issues that society is facing? How do you, as a film school, allow your students or inculcate that mindset of, as a filmmaker, you are a social engineer and you need to tell reality? Or is it a matter of, if your funder has said, just write a feel-good story, I'm going to fund you, just brush over facts, then you need to go that line? It just depends on who is funding and what their mandate is.
I think I would never encourage brushing over facts. But I also think it's important to remember what it is that you're doing. You are a vehicle for entertainment. So if you want to just be the facts, then you're a newspaper. you should be delivering those facts. But when you get to the point where you're a movie, you do have to recognize to a certain extent, this is still a form of entertainment. And you want to do it justice, and you want to do it well, and you want to make people understand what happened. But part of the way that we make people understand is we make them feel. Some newspapers don't make you feel. Right? So if our job as filmmakers is to make people feel deeply about something, well, then you're going to have to expand from that. You're going to have to deviate a little bit from that truth in the way that you tell it, right? It doesn't mean that you should just move on and make a movie that has no resemblance with what happened in real life. That's not at all what I'm saying. It is just, you do have to remember what it is that you're doing, right? And I think that different times call for different things.
Yes.
So when you make a movie like Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, you are pushing culture. You are reflecting culture, but you are also letting people know you may not see this yet, but this is what's happening. And from there, you will see the ripple effects in society. And some people go, well, did this happen because he made that movie, or did he make that movie because of this? Well, it's a little bit of both. Good filmmakers see what's coming, and they're able to help shine a light on what's happening. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, it's like this movie came and then something happened. And, so there are those kinds of movies, but there are also spaces in time where the movies were solely about escaping.
Mm-hmm.
It is where we go to feel good. We do not need to be hit with how bad it is out there, because it's so bad out there that we need to go to the movie theater just to lose ourselves in something that is just we can forget all that bad stuff. So I think it's important to remember that film is so complex, and it's all of those things. It helps us to shed a light on what's going on. It makes us, we're engaged in what's happening culturally. And sometimes we just go to laugh. We just go to just have a few hours of not thinking about what's happening outside of those walls.
Yeah.
So I think that's, a little bit of both.
Let's allow you a brief moment to brag a bit. We know that you were recently the executive producer of the feature documentary Film School Africa. Just take us through the journey of making that documentary, and also please brag a bit about the awards you won both in Barcelona as well as in Dallas.
So the filmmaker is Nathan Foth, and he came and actually made a documentary about the school. It's about the organization. So I'm in the documentary as well as the executive producer of the documentary. And so Nathan won Best Upcoming, I think, Director in Dallas. The film won in Barcelona, and it was seen all over the world, which is fantastic. It's still available on Amazon Prime and Google Play, lots of different online spaces. But that was a very special project because it's about the organization that I run. So it's really been a very unique space of getting to even travel and speak to different groups about that film, which has been really cool. So that was just a huge blessing. And right now with the DFM, we've been working through this film. It's a documentary feature called Windward. And it's about a yacht race where these 6 men were out on a yacht and never heard from again, and so that is just a very compelling story. And so we've been grateful to be able to go through the Access program, and even our students were a part of that as well, where they got to be a part of the different presentations and hearing about how to best put together finances, and here's what the pitch looks like. So it was really a great experience for our students to be able to be getting more equipped with how the South African festival system works and what that's like to pitch at that level. And so yeah, so it's been really very cool to be a part of that space and that program, and have our students get to be a part of that as well has been very special. And so yeah, so it's some big good things coming, and that we're very excited about, and some good things in the past as well that Nathan Foff's documentary especially.
Great stuff. I want to zoom into the crux of our discussion, which is access and funding, right? We know in South Africa particularly, you've got different film commissions. I know there's the Gauteng Film Commission, there's the Cape Town Film Commission, and I also know the KZN Film Commission. Those are the major ones that I know. What's been your experience in terms of the role that they play, as well as then meeting the needs of filmmakers so that there is at least some products that are export worthy, but at the same time, there's a value chain or an ecosystem that is equally primed to meet the demand and a thirst for African content globally?
Yeah. I think I'm a difficult person to ask about this question. If we had other panelists, it would have been really good because I'm an American, I actually don't have access to a lot of those funds. So anyway, so from a broad strokes perspective, I think that it's really wonderful to have like venues and that provide funding for filmmakers. It's necessary, it's needed. Making a film is not an inexpensive venture. And if you want good quality things coming out locally, someone has to be willing to pay for that. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, I would challenge South Africa to the idea that when the government is the only entity giving money, then the government determines what gets made. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's okay. And sometimes you might find yourself going, well, if I want to say something that is contrary to what the government wants me to say, I might not get funded. There you kind of have some, all of the bodies that I am aware of that give funding, at least that I've heard of in the South African context are government connected. So I do think that's one thing to, there are affluent people here. There are affluent, there are people who have disposable income, and wouldn't it be great if some of those people were reinvesting that into local content? I think that would be great.
We also know are equally excited about the inroads made by Netflix, right? Recently,
sure.
They partnered with the National Film and Video Foundation. I just want you to go back into the shoes of being an American, right? And look at how Netflix as a disruptor has changed how film production, financing, as well as promoting it has changed. Please borrow examples also from how then the fourth industrial revolution may be a positive for the film sector.
Yeah, I think certainly there's nothing wrong with change. I think that we have seen change over the years. I'm someone who still loves the movie theater, and I hope that the movie theater doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. And yet at the same time, I'm also all for this online content movement. So it's like I feel a little bit like I want to have both of those things remain. The nostalgia of going to the movies, there's just nothing like that feeling. And yet at the same time, I think it's so wonderful of Netflix to be branching out and accessing content all over the world. I think that's really, really neat. And I think it's really cool that they also have the ability to get their content out into all of the world, and so they, especially like, when you live in South Africa, it's like, if you don't have this VPN that can access all of these different things, then you don't really get to watch anything. But Netflix is pretty much like, what you see is what you get. There may be some content that is only specific to America that you can't access here, but I've been super impressed with their willingness and ability to actually go beyond their borders, whereas so many others just aren't. It's still very limited what you can watch on Amazon Prime, what you can watch on, and Apple TV is kind of getting things going, but Hulu, can't access Hulu here. You can't get HBOs and all those things. So the fact that Netflix is really leading that charge and just allowing us to access to watch different things is really, really cool. Let alone the fact that now they're getting into that space of funding. I think it's really cool. I think it's very powerful. And yeah, I'm certainly grateful that we're able to get content out. Certainly my octopus teacher was a good example of them promoting
definitely,
and doing it well, and getting people excited about it, getting people watching and talking, and so that's really just a fantastic avenue for filmmakers.
Also, when you speak of Netflix, right, you're still on the subject of access and funding. When we speak of these vehicles that may be willing to invest in a filmmaking venture, what do you feel most filmmakers or aspirant filmmakers miss by way of targeting the need of an investor who then would say, this is compelling content, I want to invest in what you've produced or what you've then presented to me?
Yeah. I think that there's probably, I think that the investors are always trying to get their money back, right? Most investors don't invest just to invest. They actually want to see a return. And so I think part of what we miss is when we get, I think, too narrowly focused. So one of the things that I've talked about with my students often is, what are the South African movies that most frequently hit the theater? Well, they're Afrikaans movies, and they all star an Afrikaans singer. So they have figured out this little niche where they feel like, if we can just do it this way, we get our money back. But they don't. They still don't. And part of the reason is because they have taken all of South Africa and they have narrowed down to this tiny little niche. And so part of what happens is there's not enough people to be able to actually bring that money in. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you really want stories that are universal. You want universal themes. Languages that can be accessed more universally, making sure that they're subtitled. You don't have to have something in English, but making sure you've got subtitles, and figuring out what is the appeal across lines. What is the appeal, not just to the people that are to my right and to my left, but what's the appeal to someone across the ocean? And I think sometimes South Africans lose, and they lose what's special and unique about South Africa because they are surrounded by it. Yeah. Because they're surrounded by it, right? So sometimes you forget that other people might not have any context for this thing, but it's so fascinating. Take them into this space, take them into this place, and give them something universal that happens within this context, right? So you have this your uniqueness, but you're also creating something that will play anywhere in the world, but that is so unique, right? So that's why Tsotsi is such a good example of what travels, right? It's this universally connected movie, but it's so specifically South Africa, and that feel is there, but it has the ability to really move beyond borders. So I think when you're looking for investors, it's hard to make your money back just plain in South Africa. So if it's just plain in South Africa, then you're losing some of that money that could be coming in other places. So I think that's just part of the thought process. What is it, even if it is truly a South African story, what might be carried along further?
Yeah, let's just quickly go into the Q&A here. So one Zianda Makingwane has asked, who are the sponsors? I think they're quite interested in then saying, I have content, but who then would be my sponsor? Maybe just again doing broad strokes in terms of who you know as particular or possible sponsors.
Sponsors of film?
Yes.
I think that there's so many. It depends on what your movie is and what your what areas like you hit. So obviously you have things like the NFVF, but you also have there's so many ITVA and all of these entities that give funding. The Sundance Institute gives funding. So part of what your job is as a filmmaker is to then research what exactly do I have to offer. So for us, our film has women at the top, female producer, female director, and then we use every movie that we make as an opportunity to actually train our students. So our students come along with us for the journey. So those are things that I can then start researching and going, okay, we're telling a story. It's an African story. It's a South African story with women at the helm. Who are the grant givers for those things? And so I start looking up women in film. You start doing research into, are there any that they specifically want African stories, right? And of course, Africa is a large place, but oftentimes it gets lumped in that way, African stories, right? And so you start going through all of those and start looking, what do I qualify? Am I, there are some people out there that only want social justice issues. Okay, does it tick on that? So you start looking in all of those various ways. What are the angles that I can actually use for funding personally? And then it kind of goes from there.
Definitely. You've also answered the question that she had with regards to where do your trainees get placed after training. I think you've basically done that, where you say you take them along the journey of filmmaking so that they also feel well at it.
We also, we have first years and second years are in training at our college. In third year, our students have internship placements. So we have been blessed to have students placed at Film Africa. We've placed students at various different training opportunities, and so we basically try to offer in their third year a wide array of opportunities where they get plugged in and connected to jobs, even rental houses, gear houses, things like that are just really cool opportunities that open up, and students our students really have been blessed to jump almost right into a job most of the time. And that's just simply because they're such good kids and they do such, they work really hard. But also they've got that humbleness and that strength of character. When they leave our program, they're really ready to do the work and put the time in.
Your potential competitor is asking, how do you run your film school? Is it from film funding or sponsorship?
Sponsorship. We don't have any government funding for our school. We are blessed because Americans tend to be very generous, and we're very grateful for that. And so I've had to pull on a lot of friends and family, and we have a board of directors that also connects to their friends and family, and so it's a lot of people doing a little bit. And so that's really how we stay funded over at Film School Africa.
Great stuff. What's been your 3 favorite South African movies thus far?
Well, I loved District 9. I love District 9 because I liked how different it was.
Yeah.
I liked the uniqueness of it. My best friend's favorite is Felicia Kent, which is a little bit older, and then I think Tsotsi is a really good solid. You know, it's just got such a solidness to it that it feels, yeah. I would say, but I would say District 9 is probably my favorite because it's got such a unique voice. It's got such a distinct style to it.
And globally, which has been the one film that you are so often forced or compelled to often reference on when you're teaching your students? Just like one of those films where you feel like, I wish I was there. This film speaks to me.
Yeah. I would say there are two, and one I think people reference quite a lot. So Shawshank Redemption is one of those movies that I think most filmmakers kind of look at and go, how on earth did they pull off something so incredible? And then Life is Beautiful, which is an Italian film, Roberto Benigni. And that film for me has so much heart. It's got so much, you find yourself just in every emotion, whether you're laughing through the first half or whether you're crying through the second half. I mean, it is just, for me, it's the ultimate in emotional journey. So those are two movies that the students that we have watching in first year, and it's required viewing.
We're almost done, by the way. You can
sure. I can relax.
What in your experience and perspective is a winning film?
A winning film.
If now your students or any would-be filmmaker, right, is on this platform where we're discussing access, and they're sitting down and they've got content, but they're not sure which one to go and pitch, how to pitch or where to pitch. If you were to sit down and say, in your own experience, both as a casting director, a film school director, as well as a teacher, this is what you feel is needed from a domestic point of view to also be globally relevant as a filmmaker. This is what would work for me as a film producer.
The core for me to everything that you do is writing what you know. So if you have a choice between 3 films and only one of those movies is so intrinsically connected to you, that's the one you should make. I have students that kind of go, well, I want to set a movie in China. And you go, well, have you been to China? No, I've never been to China. Okay, don't set a movie in China. You don't know China. Write what you know. You have so much knowledge, but when you try to reach things that are outside of your world, to write about those things, it always comes off as disingenuous because you don't really get it. And so I think it's not to say that you can't immerse yourself in something else and learn. And certainly as filmmakers, we should be doing that all the time. We should be growing our sphere. We should be having experiences that are unique and push us. But you should always get back to the core of like, what do I really know? And honestly, like one of the things that we do, we assess our own life story.
Yes.
So with my students, we go through a timeline of our lives, and we look at the things that have hurt us. We look at the things that have challenged us, have pushed us, have people who have influenced us, both for the positive and for the negative. And we break all of those moments down. And from that, we find a movie. They go back, they take one little piece, maybe it's just one little section of their life, and they write a short film about that moment. And it might not even be someone in their age. It might not be, if they're a male, it might be about a female. Things change about the story significantly.
Yeah.
But at the core, they're writing about something that is intensely personal. And those are always the best movies.
And the very last question is
Sure.
Political.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think so. I think films always have a point of view. Films always have a perspective. You're always getting someone's perspective. It's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to be completely outside of something. You always have a point of view. So I think, from that perspective, you are always giving your point of view when you make a film. Some of those are, more leading than others. Some you kind of laugh off and it's not a big deal. But yeah, I mean, you go back now, even 20 years, there are some movies where you go, wow, is that how we were treating women in movies 20 years ago? So yeah, I mean, it might have been a comedy, but it's still what we're saying. This is what society is, right? And so it definitely always has a perspective, for sure.
Katie Taylor, your concluding remarks as we wrap our session.
No, I just want to say thanks so much. It's been great to be a part of it, and we're very grateful to the Durban FilmMart and the Durban International Film Festival for all that they're doing to keep South African film moving. So really appreciate it. And if anybody wants to check out the website, they can go to filmschoolafrica.org.
Definitely. I wanted to ask, how do would-be students access the film school? Is it largely for students who are based in Cape Town? Is it for anyone who what is the criteria for anyone?
It's literally it's for anyone. We have students from all around South Africa. We have a student from Zim. We will welcome anyone to apply, and they can apply at filmschoolafrica.org. There are applications there.
And please specify that by attending Film School Africa, it doesn't mean that you already have a visa to America.
No, you do not. You definitely do not. We are definitely based in Cape Town. I know I don't sound like it, but we are definitely based in Cape Town.
Katie Taylor, thank you so much for the opportunity. You're a whirlwind of information and wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much. Do take care. Enjoy your day ahead. Great. That's been my song for you.